17-year-old Jamal Washington had survived 3 years homeless on the streets by following one rule: never get involved. But on a rainy October night, crouched behind a dumpster in a downtown alley, he witnessed two men in expensive suits tampering with a police radio, uploading something that would compromise every cop in the city. When Officer Clara Hayes walked into view, unaware she was seconds from death, Jamal did something that broke every rule that kept him alive. He grabbed a cop, covered her mouth, and whispered 3 words that would expose a conspiracy of murder, child trafficking, and corruption reaching the highest levels of power. Don't talk. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. The rain came down hard that evening, turning the streets of downtown into rivers of black water that reflected the neon lights above. People hurried past with their umbrellas up and heads down. Nobody wanted to linger in weather like this. Nobody except those who had nowhere else to go. Jamal Washington pressed himself deeper into the alcove behind the dumpster, watching the steady stream of legs rush past the mouth of the alley. His stomach had been empty for 2 days now, and the Chinese restaurant that backed onto this particular alley usually threw out their leftovers around this time. He just had to wait for the kitchen staff to make their dump run. Then he could eat. At 17, Jamal had gotten good at waiting, good at watching, good at surviving. He pulled the thin jacket tighter around his shoulders, though it did little against the October cold that seeped through every layer he wore. 3 years on the streets had taught him that comfort was a luxury he couldn't afford to think about. Stay alert, stay alive, that was the only rule that mattered. The rain drummed against the fire escape above, creating a curtain of water that partially obscured his view of the street. Through the downpour, he could see the warm glow of the shops across the way. The bookstore where he sometimes went to get warm until they kicked him out, the coffee shop that would give him day-old pastries if the right manager was working, the electronics store with TVs in the window that showed him glimpses of a world he no longer belonged to. He'd had a different life once. A small apartment with his mother, school, friends, plans for the future. But that was before everything fell apart. Before his mother started asking the wrong questions at the clinic where she worked. Before she disappeared one night and never came home. Before child services tried to put him in a home where the older kids made it clear what happened to kids like him. Kids who were too small, too young, too vulnerable. The streets were dangerous, but at least out here he could run. At least out here he had a chance. A movement at the far end of the alley caught his attention. 2 men had entered from the other side, their silhouettes barely visible through the rain. Jamal pressed himself flatter against the wall, becoming invisible in the shadows. This was his territory, and he knew every inch of it. Every loose brick, every rusted ladder, every place to hide. The men moved with purpose, but something about them felt wrong. Jamal had seen plenty of deals go down in alleys like this. Drugs, weapons, stolen goods. He knew how dealers moved, how they carried themselves. These men were different, too clean, too precise. Their shoes clicked against the wet pavement with military rhythm. They stopped about 30 feet from where Jamal hid, standing under a broken streetlight that flickered intermittently. In the brief moments of illumination, he could make out details. Both white mid-30s. The taller one had close-cropped hair and a scar across his left eyebrow. The shorter one wore glasses that caught the light when he turned his head. "You have it?" the tall one asked, his voice carrying a slight accent Jamal couldn't place. "Of course." The one with glasses reached into his coat, pulling out something small. In the flickering light, Jamal saw it was a flash drive, but not like any he'd seen before. This one had some kind of digital display on its surface, numbers scrolling across it. "And this will give us access to everything. Every patrol route, every officer's schedule, every radio frequency." The encryption took months to crack, but it's all here. The tall man took the drive, examining it closely. Then he pulled something from his own pocket, a police radio. Jamal's blood went cold. These weren't cops, he was sure of that. So why did they have police equipment? He watched as the man with glasses took the radio and did something to it, opening a panel on the side that Jamal hadn't even known existed. The flash drive went in, and for a moment the radio's display lit up with strange symbols before returning to normal. How long until it uploads? It's already done. Every radio on this frequency is now compromised. We'll hear everything they hear, know everything they know. Good. And if anyone suspects, they won't. The virus is undetectable unless you know exactly what to look for. Footsteps echoed from the street into the alley. Both men tensed, hands moving to their waists where Jamal knew weapons were hidden. A figure appeared through the rain, a police officer making her rounds. Officer Clara Hayes walked with the confidence of someone who belonged on these streets, her hand resting casually on her service weapon. She was young, maybe late 20s, with sharp eyes that swept the alley as she entered. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a tight bun under her cap, rain droplets beating on the brim. "Evening, gentlemen," she called out, her voice carrying authority despite her small frame. "Everything all right here?" The two men exchanged a quick glance. The tall one smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Just getting out of the rain, officer. My friend here was showing me a shortcut to the subway." Clara took a few steps closer, and Jamal could see her eyes narrow slightly. She'd been a cop long enough to know when something felt off. "The subway's 3 blocks that way," she said, pointing back toward the street. "This alley's a dead end." "Is it?" The man with glasses stepped forward, his demeanor suddenly changing. Where before he'd seemed nervous, now he moved with predatory grace. "How embarrassing. We must have gotten turned around." "Happens to everyone in this weather," Clara said, but her hand had shifted, now closer to her weapon. "Why don't you gentlemen head back to the street? I'll point you in the right direction." The tall man moved slightly, positioning himself to Clara's left. It was subtle, but Jamal recognized the tactic. They were trying to flank her. His heart pounded as he realized what was about to happen. They couldn't let her go, not after what she'd seen. They'd have to silence her. From his hiding spot, Jamal could see what Clara couldn't. The man with glasses reaching slowly into his coat, his fingers wrapping around something metallic. A knife, maybe, or a silenced pistol. Either way, she had seconds at most. Jamal's mind raced. He should stay hidden. Getting involved would only put him in danger. These men were professionals, dangerous in ways that street thugs weren't. And Clara was a cop. The same system that had failed his mother, that had tried to lock him away. Why should he care what happened to her? But then he saw something in Clara's stance, in the way she held herself. She wasn't like the cops who'd hassled him for sleeping in doorways or chased him from warm buildings. There was something genuine about her, something that reminded him of his mother, that same desire to help, to protect. The man with glasses made his move, his hand coming out of his coat fast. Without thinking, Jamal burst from his hiding place, his worn sneakers slapping against the wet pavement as he ran. Both men turned toward the sound, momentarily distracted. "Officer, watch out!" Jamal should have yelled, but something made him act instead. He crashed into Clara from the side, his hand going over her mouth as they tumbled toward the wall. Her training kicked in immediately. Her elbow drove back in his ribs, her free hand going for her weapon. "Don't talk," he whispered urgently in her ear, his voice desperate. "Just listen, please." Clara's body was tense, ready to throw him off and arrest him, but something in his tone made her pause. Her eyes, wide with adrenaline, met his, and she saw the terror there. This wasn't an attack. This was a warning. The two men had recovered from their surprise, moving toward them now. The tall one's hand was inside his jacket, and the other had produced a tactical knife that gleamed in the flickering light. "Let her go, kid," the tall one said, his accent more pronounced now. "This doesn't concern you." Jamal kept his grip on Clara, pulling her back toward the shadows. "Your radio," he whispered, so quiet she almost couldn't hear. "They did something to your radio." Clara's hand went instinctively to the device on her belt, and that's when she heard it, a faint clicking, almost like static but rhythmic, deliberate, like it was transmitting. Her entire body went rigid with understanding. These men weren't just criminals. They were something worse. And this homeless kid had just saved her life. "Smart boy," the man with glasses said, taking another step forward. "But not smart enough. Officer Hayes, we really need you to come with us." Quietly. They knew her name. Clara's blood went cold. This wasn't random. They'd been waiting for her. "Run," she whispered to Jamal, her hand finding her weapon. "When I move, you run." But Jamal didn't let go. Instead, he pulled her backward, toward a gap between the buildings that she hadn't even noticed. "Trust me," he whispered. I know these alleys better than anyone. The clicking from her radio grew louder, and suddenly other sounds joined it, voices distant but getting closer. The two men smiled. Backup's coming, the tall one said. But not the kind you're hoping for, Officer Hayes. Clara understood then. Whoever was coming, they weren't there to help her. The radio wasn't just compromised. It was being used to coordinate something bigger. Something that involved cops who weren't really cops. She made her choice. Instead of drawing her weapon, she let Jamal pull her into the gap, into the darkness where the rain couldn't reach. Behind them, she heard the men curse and give chase, but Jamal was already moving, his hand in hers, guiding her through passages she didn't know existed. They ran through the dark, splashing through puddles, climbing over chain-link fences, squeezing through spaces that seemed too small for an adult. Clara's radio continued its ominous clicking, and she wanted to throw it away, but Jamal stopped her. "Keep it," he panted as they paused in another shadowed alcove. "We need to know what they're doing." She looked at this kid, skinny, soaked, probably hungry, who just risked everything to save a cop he didn't even know. "Why?" she asked. "Why help me?" Jamal's eyes were old, too old for his age. "Because nobody listened before," he said, "and someone died because of it." Before Clara could respond, voices echoed from nearby. The hunt was on, and they were the prey. They crouched in the darkness of a loading dock, their breathing heavy from the run. Clara's mind raced as she tried to process what had just happened. This teenager, this homeless kid, had just saved her from something she didn't fully understand yet. "Start talking," she said, keeping her voice low. "What did you see exactly?" Jamal peered around the corner, checking for pursuit before answering. Two men. They had a flash drive, something high-tech. They plugged it into a police radio, your kind of radio. Said something about uploading a virus, compromising every radio on the frequency. Clara's hand went to her radio again. The clicking had stopped, but somehow that made it worse. "You're telling me my entire precinct's communications might be compromised." That's what they said. Every patrol route, every schedule. Jamal turned back to her, water dripping from his soaked hair. "They knew your name, Officer Hayes." This wasn't random. Clara studied him in the dim light. He was younger than she'd first thought, maybe 16 or 17. His clothes were worn but relatively clean, and his eyes held an intelligence that the streets hadn't managed to kill yet. "I should arrest you," she said. "You grab an officer, put your hand over my mouth. That's assault." "Yeah, well, you're welcome for saving your life." There was no heat in his words, just tired resignation, like he'd expected nothing less. "What's your name?" He hesitated. "Jamal." "Jamal what?" "Just Jamal." Clara knew better than to push. Street kids had their reasons for keeping things close. "Okay, just Jamal." Those men described them. Everything you can remember. Jamal closed his eyes, and Clara watched as his face changed, becoming focused in a way that surprised her. The tall one, about 6'2", maybe 190 pounds. White mid-30s. Scar through his left eyebrow. Old, probably from a knife. Military bearing, the way he stood moved. Had an accent, Eastern European maybe. Serbian or Croatian, something like that. Clara pulled out her notepad, writing quickly despite the rain. "Go on." The shorter one, maybe 5'10", 160. Glasses wire-rimmed. Also white, same age range. Nervous tick. He kept adjusting his glasses when he talked. Soft hands, no calluses. Tech guy, not a fighter. But he had a knife, tactical, probably ceramic from the way it looked. You saw all that in the dark. Jamal shrugged. You learn to notice things when your life depends on it. The tall one had a tattoo on his neck, just visible above his collar. Cyrillic writing. And they both wore boots, but expensive ones. Tactical, but trying to look civilian. Claire stared at him. These weren't the observations of a typical street kid. "Where did you learn to do that?" "My mom was a nurse," Jamal said quietly. "She taught me to pay attention to details. Said it could save someone's life someday." "Was." "She's gone." Before Clara could probe further, the sound of engines echoed through the loading dock. She peered out and saw the black van from the alley cruise slowly past, its windows tinted too dark to be legal. "That's them," Jamal whispered. Clara reached for her radio, then stopped. If it was compromised, she pulled out her cell phone instead, but Jamal grabbed her wrist. You can't. Think about it. They knew your name, knew your route. Someone in your department is feeding them information. You call this in, and whoever's dirty will know exactly where we are. Clara wanted to argue, but the logic was sound. Then what do you suggest? We follow them. Find out what they're really doing. We? No. This is police business. I'm getting you somewhere safe, and then... And then what? You'll trust the same people who might have set you up? Jamal's voice was harder now. You don't get it. These aren't regular criminals. The tech they had, the way they moved, this is something bigger. Clara studied him again. There was something he wasn't telling her, something personal about this. Why do you care? Why risk your neck for a cop? Jamal looked away. I told you. Someone died because nobody listened. Your mother. He nodded slowly. She was a whistleblower. Tried to expose something at the clinic where she worked. Files were going missing, patient records being altered. She went to the police, but nothing happened. Then one night, she just disappeared. Cops said she probably ran off, abandoned me. But I know better. Clara felt something shift in her chest. She'd become a cop because of her own loss. Her younger brother, killed in a gang shooting when he was just 15. She'd wanted to make a difference, to protect kids like him. Kids like Jamal. The van had stopped at the end of the block. Clara made a decision that went against every protocol she'd been trained to follow. Okay, she said. We follow them, but we do this my way. You stay behind me, you do exactly what I say, and if things go bad, you run. Understood, Jamal nodded, but she could see in his eyes that he had no intention of running. They moved through the rain-soaked streets, keeping to the shadows. The van led them deeper into the warehouse district, where the streetlights were fewer and the buildings stood like dark monuments to the city's industrial past. Clara's radio crackled occasionally, bursts of static that might have been communication or might have been the virus doing its work. There, Jamal pointed. The van had pulled into a warehouse, its loading door sliding shut behind it. Clara checked her weapon, then looked at Jamal. You should go. This is where it gets dangerous. I've been living on these streets for 3 years, he said. I know dangerous. She wanted to argue, but there wasn't time. And truthfully, she needed him. He knew this area, knew how to move unseen. And right now, she couldn't trust anyone else. They circled the building, finding a fire escape that led to a row of broken windows on the second floor. Jamal went first, moving with the fluid grace of someone who'd done this many times before. Clara followed, trying not to think about how many procedures she was violating. Inside, the warehouse was mostly dark, but lights glowed from the far end. They crept along the catwalks, the sound of rain on the metal roof masking their footsteps. Below, Clara could see several vehicles, including the van. Men moved between them, unloading equipment. Look, Jamal whispered, pointing. On a table lit by work lights, someone had spread out maps and photos. Clara recognized them immediately. Patrol routes for her precinct, photos of officers, including one of herself. They're targeting cops, she breathed. No, Jamal corrected, studying the setup. They're targeting specific cops. Look at the photos, they're all marked. He was right. Red X's crossed out some faces, while others were circled. Clara's photo had a question mark. They're sorting them, she realized, deciding who's with them and who's not. Her radio crackled again, and this time she heard voices. Not the men below, but dispatch. Standard chatter, but now she wondered if someone else was listening too, cataloging every response, every location. One of the men below pulled out a phone. Even from their distance, Clara could hear his side of the conversation. Yes, sir. The virus is uploaded. No, he's got away, but it doesn't matter. Yes, the captain is expecting our report. Tomorrow night, as planned. Clara's blood went cold. The captain. Her captain was involved in this. Jamal must have seen her face change. You know who he's talking about? She nodded, unable to speak. Captain Morrison had been her mentor, the one who'd encouraged her when other officers dismissed her as too soft, too idealistic. He'd been like a father to her after her brother died. We need to get out of here, Jamal said urgently. Get evidence, then figure out who we can trust. But as they turned to leave, a hand fell on Jamal's shoulder. They'd been so focused on the scene below, they hadn't heard someone climb up behind them. Well, a voice said, What do we have here? Clara spun, her hand going to her weapon, but stopped when she saw who it was. Officer Danny Brooks, from her precinct. Relief flooded through her. Danny, thank God. We need to. To what, Hayes? Brooks's smile was cold. Cause more problems? Can't have that. The betrayal hit her like a physical blow. Brooks had been her partner for 6 months. They'd shared meals, talked about their families, backed each other up on dangerous calls. You're one of them. One of them. Brooks laughed. Clara, we are them. The whole department, or at least the one smart enough to see which way the wind's blowing. Jamal tensed beside her, ready to run or fight. Clara's mind raced, calculating odds. Brooks hadn't drawn his weapon yet, which meant he wanted them alive. For now. Why? She asked, buying time. Why? Brooks shook his head. Look around you, Hayes. We risk our lives every day for what? Mediocre pay, no respect, and a city that hates us? The captain showed us a better way. Protection for those who pay, elimination of those who don't. Real power, real money. That's not what we swore an oath to do. Our oath. Brooks stepped closer. Our oath was to protect and serve. Well, now we protect those worth protecting and serve our own interests. You could have been part of it, Clara. The captain wanted to bring you in, but you're too much of a Girl Scout. From below, voices called up. They've been spotted. Time's up, Brooks said, finally reaching for his weapon. Let's go. Both of you. But Jamal had been waiting for this moment. He grabbed a rusted pipe from the catwalk and swung it at the overhead light. The bulb shattered, plunging them into darkness. Clara heard Brooks curse, heard his weapon clear its holster. Run, she shouted, grabbing Jamal and pulling him toward the windows. Brooks's shot went wide, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. They crashed through the broken window onto the fire escape, rain immediately soaking them again. More shouts from below, men pouring out of the warehouse. They ran through the industrial maze, feet splashing through puddles, hearts pounding. Behind them, engines roared to life. The hunt was on. This way, Jamal yanked her into an alley so narrow they had to turn sideways. At the other end, he lifted a camouflage piece of plywood, revealing a hole in the fence. They squeezed through just as headlights swept the alley entrance. On the other side was a homeless encampment under an overpass. People looked up as they ran past, but nobody said anything. These were Jamal's people, and they knew better than to get involved. Finally, they stopped in an abandoned subway entrance, both gasping for breath. Clara's radio was crackling constantly now, voices she recognized coordinating a search. For her. They're saying you went rogue, Jamal said, listening. That you attacked a fellow officer. That you're unstable. Clara laughed bitterly. Of course they are. Control the narrative, control the response. She looked at this kid who'd saved her life twice now in one night. I am sorry. You're in this now because of me. No, Jamal said firmly. I'm in this because it's the right thing. Because maybe this time, someone will listen. Clara pulled out her phone, scrolling through her contacts. Who could she trust? Who wasn't compromised? The captain had been her rock, and if he was dirty, then who else was? There's one person, she said finally. Detective Rivera from Internal Affairs. Everyone hates IA, which means they probably didn't bother trying to turn her. You sure? No, but we need help, and we need it fast. As she dialed, Jamal kept watch. The rain was letting up, but the danger was just beginning. They had no evidence except their word, and right now, the entire police force was looking for them. Rivera, the voice answered. Maria, it's Clara Hayes. I need help, and I need you to listen very carefully. There was a pause. Clara, there's a bolo out on you. They're saying you. I know what they're saying. It's all lies. Maria, the department is compromised. The captain, Brooks, maybe more. They're working with someone planning something big. Another pause, longer. Where are you? Clara hesitated. This was the moment of truth. Either Rivera was clean, or they were about to walk into a trap. Jamal touched her arm. Trust someone, he said quietly. We can't do this alone. Clara gave Rivera their location. Come alone, please. After she hung up, they waited in tense silence. The rain had stopped completely now, leaving only the drip of water from the rusted ceiling above. Clara's radio had gone quiet, which somehow felt more ominous than the chatter. Thank you, she said suddenly, for warning me. for staying. You didn't have to do any of this. Jamal shrugged, but she could see the emotion in his eyes. Nobody helped my mom. Maybe if someone had been brave enough to listen, to act. He trailed off. We'll stop them, Clara promised. Whatever they're planning, we'll stop them. It's tomorrow night, Jamal said. Whatever the big plan is. That's what the man said on the phone. Clara nodded. 24 hours to figure out who they could trust, what was being planned, and how to stop it, all while being hunted by the very people who were supposed to be the good guys. A car pulled up outside, its engine idling. Clara drew her weapon, pushing Jamal behind her. Footsteps approached, careful, but not trying to be silent. Clara, Rivera's voice called. I'm alone. Clara emerged slowly, weapon still drawn. Detective Maria Rivera stood in the entrance, her hands visible, her expression concerned but not hostile. Put the gun down, Hayes. If I was here to arrest you, I'd have brought backup. Clara lowered her weapon slightly. How do I know you're not one of them? Because I've been investigating irregularities in the department for months, Rivera said. Missing evidence, altered reports, suspicious patterns. I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't prove it. Until now. She looked past Clara to where Jamal stood in the shadows. Who's the kid? The only person I trust right now, Clara said. He saved my life. Rivera studied them both, then made a decision. Get in the car. Both of you. We need to get somewhere safe and figure out what the hell is going on. As they walked to the car, Jamal whispered to Clara, You sure about this? Clara looked at the teenager who'd risked everything for a stranger, who carried the weight of his mother's death and still chose to help. Then she looked at Rivera, who'd come alone despite the risk. No, she admitted, but sometimes you have to take a leap of faith. They got in the car, not knowing if they were driving toward salvation or into another trap. But at least they were no longer alone. The fragile alliance had grown by one, and tomorrow night was coming fast. Rivera started the engine and pulled away from the curb. In the rearview mirror, Clara saw the shadows move. They were being watched. The game had only just begun, and she still didn't know all the players. But she had something the conspirators hadn't counted on, a homeless teenager with nothing to lose and everything to prove. And sometimes that was enough to change everything. Don't talk, Jamal had said in that alley. Now was time to make some noise. Detective Rivera's car moved through the empty streets as midnight approached, the city quiet except for the occasional siren in the distance. Clara sat in the front seat, her compromised radio silent on her belt, while Jamal watched the streets from the back, cataloging every turn, every landmark, always planning an escape route. We need to go back to the warehouse district, Clara said, breaking the tense silence. There's evidence there. Maps, photos, plans. That's suicide, Rivera replied, checking her mirrors for the third time in as many minutes. They'll be expecting you. Not if we're smart about it. Jamal leaned forward between the seats. There's more than one warehouse down there. They can't watch them all. Rivera glanced at him in the mirror. How does a kid know so much about the warehouse district? It's where people go when they don't want to be found, Jamal said simply. The homeless, runaways, people hiding from something. I've spent enough nights there to know every building, every entrance. Clara turned to look at him. You can get us in without being seen. Maybe, but we need to know what we're looking for first. Rivera pulled into an underground parking garage, the fluorescent lights harsh after the darkness outside. Before we do anything, I need to show you both something. She led them to a service elevator, using a key card Clara didn't recognize. They descended to a sub-basement level that wasn't supposed to exist according to any building plans Clara had seen. What is this place? Clara asked as they emerged into a small, windowless room filled with file boxes and computer equipment. My insurance policy, Rivera said. 6 months ago, I started noticing things. Evidence going missing, case files being altered, witnesses suddenly changing their stories. Every time I tried to investigate through official channels, I hit walls. So I started keeping copies of everything here. She pulled out a box marked with the previous month's date. Look at this. Inside were photos, reports, financial documents. Clara recognized some of the faces, officers from various precincts, including her own. But there were others too. Business owners, city officials, even a judge. It's not just the police, Rivera explained. It's a whole network. Protection rackets, drug trafficking, human smuggling. They've built an entire shadow system within the legitimate one. Jamal picked up a photo, his face going pale. I know her. Clara and Rivera looked at the image. It showed a middle-aged black woman in medical scrubs. That's Dr. Patricia Williams, Rivera said. She disappeared 2 years ago after reporting irregularities at her clinic. That's my mother, Jamal whispered. Her name was Patricia Washington, not Williams, but that's her. Rivera's eyes widened. Your mother was the whistleblower? Clara, do you understand what this means? This kid is the key to everything. His mother had evidence, real evidence. That's why they made her disappear. Clara put her hand on Jamal's shoulder, feeling him tremble slightly. Did she ever tell you where she kept her files? She was paranoid near the end, Jamal said, his voice thick with emotion. Said she had insurance, something hidden where only I would know to look. But she disappeared before she could tell me where. Think, Rivera urged. Any place special to both of you? Somewhere she might have felt was safe. Jamal closed his eyes, remembering. There was this old warehouse where we used to go when I was younger. She'd take me there to watch the sunset from the roof. Said it was our secret place where we could see the whole city, but the city couldn't see us. Which warehouse? Clara asked. Building 7 in the industrial district. It's been abandoned for years. Rivera grabbed her keys. Then that's where we're going. As they drove through the dark streets, Clara's radio suddenly crackled to life. But instead of police chatter, music played, an old song her brother used to love. Then a voice cut through. Officer Hayes, we know you're listening. It was Captain Morrison, his familiar voice now sinister. You've involved civilians in police business. That's unfortunate. Turn yourself in, and we'll ensure the boy isn't hurt. Clara reached for the radio to respond, but Jamal stopped her. Don't. They're tracking it somehow. Smart kid. Morrison's voice continued, as if he could hear them. His mother was smart too. Too smart for her own good. Jamal's hands clenched into fists. We have eyes everywhere, Clara. Every camera, every informant, every corner of this city. You can't hide forever. And when we find you, and we will find you, that boy will pay for your stubbornness. The radio went dead. Pull over, Clara said suddenly. Rivera complied, pulling into an empty lot. Clara got out, removed her radio, and threw it as hard as she could into a storm drain. No more games, she said, getting back in. We get the evidence, then we burn their whole operation down. They parked 3 blocks from Building 7, approaching on foot through the shadows. The warehouse loomed above them, its broken windows like dead eyes. Jamal led them to a section of fence that looked solid, but swung open on hidden hinges. Your mom set this up? Clara asked. Together, yeah. Our escape route if things went bad. Inside, the warehouse was a maze of rusted machinery and empty crates. Jamal moved through it like he'd been born there, leading them to a service ladder that went up the exterior wall. She'd always check this brick, he said, running his hand along the wall at the 3rd floor. Said she was making sure it was safe, but he pushed on one brick, then another, until one shifted. Behind it was a small space, and inside that, wrapped in plastic, was a flash drive and a notebook. Clara shone her flashlight on the notebook as Jamal opened it with shaking hands. His mother's handwriting filled the pages. Names, dates, transactions. A complete record of the conspiracy's operations. She documented everything, Rivera breathed. This is enough to bring down the entire network. But their celebration was short-lived. Lights suddenly blazed from below, flooding the warehouse with harsh illumination. They'd been found. Move! Clara shouted, but it was too late. Men in tactical gear were already swarming the building, their movements coordinated and professional. They ran deeper into the warehouse, feet clanging on metal catwalks. Below them, Clara could see at least a dozen men spreading out, cutting off exits. This way, Jamal led them through a hole in the wall to the adjacent building, connected by a precarious plank bridge that groaned under their weight. They could hear pursuit behind them, boots on metal, shouted commands. These weren't regular cops. They moved like military, special forces maybe. In the second building, Jamal guided them to what looked like a dead end, then pushed aside a sheet of corrugated metal to reveal another hidden passage. They crawled through, emerging in a mechanical room filled with old HVAC equipment. Wait, Clara said, hearing something. Voices, but not from their pursuers. She peered through a ventilation grate and saw something that made her blood run cold. Below was a massive room she hadn't known existed, and it was full of activity. Tables loaded with weapons, drugs, stacks of money. And in the center, a group of men studying architectural blueprints spread across a table. That's City Hall, Rivera whispered, looking at the plans. They're planning an attack on City Hall. No, Clara corrected, studying the markings. Not an attack. Look at the patrol routes marked. They're planning to replace security during tomorrow's commissioner's address. They're going to control the entire building. The commissioner is announcing a new anti-corruption task force, Rivera said, understanding dawning on her face. They're going to kill him and blame it on us, Clara finished. A rogue cop and a street kid. The perfect fall guys. One of the men below turned, and Clara recognized him immediately. The tall man from the alley, the one with the scar through his eyebrow. He was talking to someone on the phone. Yes, sir. Everything is in place. The virus has given us complete access to their communications. Tomorrow night, during the commissioner's speech, we'll have control of every security camera, every radio frequency. The police response will be whatever we want it to be. Jamal was recording everything on Clara's phone, his hand steady despite the danger. And the Hayes situation, the man continued. Being handled. She'll be found with the weapon, the kid with her. Murder-suicide, driven crazy by the stress of being exposed as corrupt. The media will eat it up. Clara felt sick. They weren't just planning to kill the commissioner. They were going to destroy everything she'd worked for, everything she believed in. A sound behind them made them freeze. Someone was in the passage they'd come through. They were trapped. There's another way out, Jamal whispered, pointing to an old garbage chute. But it's a straight drop into the bay. How far? Maybe 30 feet. Rivera looked pale. I can't swim. We don't have a choice, Clara said as footsteps grew closer. She helped Rivera into the chute first, then Jamal. Just as she was about to follow, the corrugated metal burst open. The man with the scar stood there, weapon drawn. Officer Hayes, we've been looking for you. Clara didn't hesitate. She dove backward into the chute just as he fired, the bullet sparking off the metal where she'd been standing. The fall seemed to last forever. Then she hit the cold water hard, the impact driving the air from her lungs. She surfaced, gasping, and saw Jamal supporting Rivera, who was panicking. I've got her, Jamal said. Swim. They made it to a concrete pier, pulling themselves up as searchlights swept the water behind them. Clara's mother's notebook was soaked, but still intact in its plastic wrapping. The flash drive was in Jamal's pocket. We need to get this to someone who can act on it, Rivera said through chattering teeth. Someone outside the city's jurisdiction. The FBI, Clara said. There's a field office downtown. They'll be watching it, Jamal pointed out. Then we make copies first. Upload it somewhere safe. Clara was thinking fast. Rivera, you still have that secure server you mentioned? Rivera nodded. But we need to get to my equipment. As they talked, Jamal was looking at the notebook, his mother's final gift. There's something else here, he said. Names of clean cops, ones she was sure weren't compromised. Look, Clara read the list. There were only 12 names, but she recognized them all. Good cops, idealistic ones. The kind of cynical veterans made fun of. We need to contact them, she said. If we're going to stop this, we need help from inside. I can reach out, Rivera said. Carefully. But Clara, even if we get the evidence out, even if we expose everything, they still have tomorrow night. They still have their plan. Clara looked at Jamal, 17 years old, homeless, carrying the weight of his mother's death, and now this impossible burden. He looked back at her, and she saw not a kid, but a warrior, someone who'd been fighting his whole life and wasn't about to stop now. Then we stop them, Clara said. We save the commissioner, expose the conspiracy, and bring them all down. The three of us against an army of corrupt cops and mercenaries? Rivera asked. 4, Jamal corrected. My mom's with us. Her work, her sacrifice, it all leads to tomorrow night. They made their way through the dark city, 3 unlikely allies bound by necessity and a shared desire for justice. Behind them, the warehouse district blazed with activity as their enemies marshaled their forces. Tomorrow would bring the confrontation they couldn't avoid. But tonight, they had evidence, they had each other, and they had something their enemies didn't expect, the determination of people with nothing left to lose. The abandoned church stood like a monument to forgotten faith, its stained glass windows dark, its doors chained shut for years. But Jamal knew a way in through the basement, a route he'd used on the coldest nights when the shelters were full and the streets too dangerous. They huddled in what had been the priest's office, a single candle providing light while Rivera worked on her laptop, uploading the evidence to multiple secure servers. Clara stood watch at the window, observing the empty street below, while Jamal studied his mother's notebook, absorbing every detail. "We can't stay here long," Clara said. "They'll expand their search grid soon." "Almost done," Rivera replied, her fingers flying over the keyboard. "I'm sending encrypted copies to 3 different federal agencies and 2 journalists I trust. If something happens to us, the truth will still get out." Jamal looked up from the notebook. She knew about the commissioner's speech. Look, she wrote about it months ago. They've been planning this for a long time. Clara moved from the window to read over his shoulder. Patricia Washington's notes were meticulous, documenting meetings she'd overheard, shipments of weapons disguised as medical supplies, cops who'd suddenly had their debts paid off. "Your mother was brilliant," Clara said softly. "She built a case that would stand up in any court." "A lot of good it did her," Jamal said bitterly. "Hey," Clara sat beside him. "She saved lives with this. We're going to finish what she started." Jamal was quiet for a moment, then spoke. "She used to say that courage wasn't about not being afraid. It was about doing the right thing despite the fear. She was terrified those last weeks, I could see it. But she kept gathering evidence, kept pushing. She sounds like an incredible woman." She was, and they killed her for it. Rivera closed her laptop. Uploaded. "But Clara's right, we need to move. I reached out to 2 of the clean cops on the list. They'll meet us at dawn, but not here." "Where?" Clara asked. "Riverside Park. Public enough that our friends can't just grab us, but isolated enough for a private conversation." They left the church separately, taking different routes to avoid detection. Jamal led them through a network of alleys and abandoned buildings, spaces invisible to most but familiar to those who lived on the margins. As they walked, Clara's burner phone buzzed. She'd bought it from a convenience store, paying cash, giving them one line of communication that wasn't compromised. "Hey," she answered. "Clara, thank God. It was Officer Susan Marks, one of the clean cops on Patricia Washington's list. I got Rivera's message. This is insane. The captain? Brooks? How many others? Too many. Susan, we need people we can trust. Tomorrow night." "I know. The commissioner's speech." "Clara, there's something else. They put out a kill order on you. Not an arrest warrant. They want you dead. And the kid with you." Clara looked at Jamal, who was helping Rivera navigate a particularly treacherous section of alley. "We have evidence, Susan. Enough to bury them all. Then stay alive long enough to use it. I'll see you at dawn." They found shelter in a shipping container that Jamal had set up as an emergency hideout months ago. Inside were blankets, water bottles, some canned food, survival supplies for someone who'd learned never to depend on tomorrow. "You've got safe houses all over the city," Rivera observed. "Not safe houses, just options." Jamal opened a can of beans, offering it to them. "Never know when you'll need to disappear." As they ate cold beans in the darkness, Clara found herself thinking about the strange path that had led them here. A decorated cop, an internal affairs detective, and a homeless teenager. If someone had told her yesterday that these would be her allies against a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of law enforcement, she'd have laughed. "Can I ask you something?" Jamal said to Clara. "Why'd you become a cop?" Clara considered the question. "My brother was 15 when he died. Shot by gang members who were never caught. I watched the detectives work his case, saw how hard they tried even when the leads went cold. I wanted to be like them, wanted to protect other kids, other families. But the system's broken," Jamal pointed out. "Parts of it, yeah, but not all of it. There's still good cops, good people trying to make a difference. Your mother's list proves that. 12 names out of thousands. 12 who she was certain about. There are more, Jamal. People who join for the right reasons, who still believe in protecting and serving. We just need to remind them what that means." Rivera had been quiet, but now she spoke. "My father was a cop. 20 years on the force. Never took a dime he didn't earn. He killed himself when I was 16. Left a note saying he couldn't stand watching the department rot from the inside anymore. That's why I joined IA, to fight the rot. They sat in silence, 3 people bound by loss and a desire for justice. Tomorrow night, Clara said finally, we stop them. We save the commissioner, expose the conspiracy, and honor everyone who died trying to reveal the truth. How? Rivera asked. We've got evidence, but they control the security, the communications, probably half the cops will be there. Jamal pulled out a piece of paper, sketching a rough map of City Hall from memory. I've been in there before. Homeless services are in the basement. I know the layout, the blind spots. You're not going in there, Clara said immediately. It's too dangerous. You need me. I can get places you can't, see things you'd miss. Jamal, my mother died for this. His voice was steady, determined. I'm not sitting on the sidelines. Before Clara could argue further, her burner phone buzzed. Unknown number. Don't answer that, Rivera warned. But something made Clara pick up. Yeah. Officer Hayes. The voice was electronically distorted. You don't know me, but I know you. I know what you're trying to do. Who is this? Someone who's been watching from the inside for a long time. The commissioner's speech is a trap, but not the one you think. They're not just going to kill him. They're going to massacre everyone who opposes them. Clean cops, honest politicians, journalists. One massive false flag operation that will let them seize control of the entire city. Clara's blood went cold. How do you know this? Because I helped plan it, before I grew a conscience. Listen carefully. There are 3 teams. One for the commissioner, one for the witnesses, one for the evidence plant. You can't stop all 3. Then what do you suggest? Turn their trap against them. They expect you to try to save the commissioner. So don't. Save everyone else. And Hayes? Trust the kid. He sees what others miss. The line went dead. Rivera had been listening. It could be a trap. Or it could be someone like us, Jamal said. Someone who wants to do the right thing, but is trapped in the wrong place. Clara made a decision. We proceed as planned, but we adjust for this new information. Rivera, can you get those clean cops to focus on protecting the civilians? Maybe, if they believe us. They will when they see the evidence. As dawn approached, they made their way to Riverside Park. The city was waking up, early joggers and dog walkers providing cover. They found Susan Marks and Detective Ray Thompson waiting by the fountain, both looking nervous. Clara, Susan said, pulling her into a quick hug. Everyone thinks you've lost it. The story they're spinning is a lie, Clara finished. All of it. Ray, Susan, what I'm about to show you will change everything. She pulled out the flash drive, but Ray stepped back. How do we know this isn't some elaborate setup? How do we know you haven't been turned? It was Jamal who answered. Because they killed my mother for this evidence. Because they're planning to murder dozens of innocent people tonight. Because if we don't act, the city falls into their hands completely. Ray studied the teenager. You're Patricia Washington's son. I remember her. She came to me once, trying to report something. I didn't listen. Thought she was paranoid. Everyone did, Jamal said without accusation. That's how they've gotten away with it for so long. Rivera opened her laptop, showing them the evidence. Photos, documents, recorded conversations. Susan's face went pale as she recognized fellow officers in compromising positions. My God, she breathed. How deep does this go? All the way to the top, Clara said. But we can stop them. Tonight, during the commissioner's speech, they'll make their move. We need to be ready. You're asking us to go against our own department, Ray said. I'm asking you to save it, Clara corrected. To be the cops we all swore to be. Susan looked at Ray, then back at Clara. What do you need? They spent the next hour planning, using Jamal's knowledge of City Hall's layout and the clean cops' access to create a counter-strategy. It was dangerous, probably suicidal, but it was their only chance. As they prepared to separate, Jamal pulled Clara aside. That person on the phone, they said to trust me. But I need you to trust me too. There's something I haven't told you. What? My mother didn't just leave evidence. She left contacts. People in the shadows who've been waiting for the right moment. If things go bad tonight, things won't go bad. But if they do, I can call and help. People who exist outside the system. People who've been preparing for this. Clara studied him. This 17-year-old kid who'd survived on the streets, who'd saved her life, who carried his mother's legacy like armor. "I trust you," she said simply. "Whatever happens tonight, I trust you." As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the park, they dispersed, each carrying their piece of the plan, each knowing that by nightfall, everything would change. Clara watched Jamal disappear into the crowd, just another homeless kid in a city full of them. But she knew better. He was their secret weapon, the element their enemies would never see coming. Tonight, the conspirators would learn what Patricia Washington had known all along. That courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about doing the right thing despite the fear. And tonight, her son would prove that sometimes the smallest voice can create the biggest echo. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the city as Clara, Jamal, and Rivera converged near City Hall from different directions. They'd spent the day apart, each preparing their piece of the plan. Now, with only hours before the commissioner's speech, they met in a food truck parking area 2 blocks away, using the crowd as cover. "Status?" Clara asked, buying coffee from a vendor to look casual. "Susan and Ray have 6 more clean cops ready to help," Rivera reported. "They're already inside, positioned at key points." "The Shadow Network is on standby," Jamal added, sipping a hot chocolate someone had bought him. "They won't intervene unless everything goes south." Clara noticed he looked different, cleaner, wearing clothes that fit. "Where did you?" "Susan brought them. Said I'd stand out less if I looked like I belonged." A news van pulled up nearby, and Clara tensed until she saw Rivera nod. "That's our journalist contact. She'll be filming everything, streaming live, so they can't suppress the footage." They watched City Hall's main entrance, where security was already increasing. Metal detectors, bag checks, uniformed officers everywhere. But Clara knew the real threat was already inside. "There," Jamal pointed subtly. The black van from the warehouse district was parked in an official vehicle spot. "They're here." Clara's burner phone buzzed. Susan's voice was tense. "We've got a problem. They're redirecting all the clean cops to perimeter duty. They're isolating us from the main event." "Then we adapt," Clara said. "Stick to your positions. Watch for the 3 teams our source mentioned." As they talked, Jamal noticed something. A homeless man across the street, but his shoes were too new, his posture too alert. "We're being watched," he murmured. Rivera casually turned, using her phone's camera as a mirror. "I see him. There's another one by the hot dog cart." They were closing in. "Split up," Clara ordered. "Stick to the plan." "We meet inside." They dispersed into the crowd. Jamal headed for the service entrance he'd mapped out, Rivera toward the press entrance with fake credentials, and Clara straight to the main entrance, where she'd be most expected. As Clara approached the metal detectors, she saw Captain Morrison standing with the security chief. Their eyes met, and Morrison smiled coldly. "Officer Hayes," he called out loudly. "Shouldn't you be on administrative leave?" Every cop in the area turned to look. Clara kept walking forward. "I'm here for the commissioner's speech, sir. Same as every year." "Not this year." Morrison stepped forward. "You're under investigation. You shouldn't be here. Unless you have formal charges, I have every right to attend a public event." Morrison's smile widened. "Actually, I do have charges. Hayes, you're under arrest for conspiracy, assault on a fellow officer, and suspected terrorism." The uniformed cops moved in, but Susan Marks stepped between them. "Captain, I'll handle this." "Hayes, come with me." Morrison's eyes narrowed. "Marks, I gave you an order, and I'm following it, sir." Taking her into custody. Susan gripped Clara's arm, but her touch was gentle. A signal. As Susan led her away, Clara heard Morrison speaking into his radio. "Target 1 is in play. Proceed to Phase 2. They ducked into a side corridor, where Susan quickly uncuffed her. Ray's already inside. Morrison's got about 30 dirty cops in there, but there are twice as many who don't know what's happening. Then we use that. When this goes down, the good cops will react instinctively to protect civilians. If we can prove who the bad guys are." Clara pulled out a small device Rivera had given her. "Signal jammer. When I activate this, only our encrypted radios will work. Their coordination goes to hell." Meanwhile, Jamal had made it to the service entrance, slipping past distracted guards who were focused on the main approaches. The basement was exactly as he remembered, a maze of storage rooms and utility corridors. He moved through them quickly, heading for the mechanical room that overlooked the main auditorium. But as he rounded a corner, he froze. The tall man with the scar stood there, examining what looked like explosive devices. I wondered when you'd show up, the man said without turning. The Washington boy. Your mother spoke about you before the end. Jamal's hands clenched. You killed her. No, I just asked questions. Others handled the wet work. He turned, studying Jamal with cold eyes. You look like her. Same stubborn set to the jaw. What are you planning? The man laughed. Planning? Boy, it's already done. Charges set in 3 locations. When they detonate, the building comes down. The commissioner, the honest cops, the journalists, even you and your friend Hayes. All dead. And tomorrow, the city wakes up to martial law with our people in charge. You're going to kill hundreds of innocent people. Innocent. The man's expression hardened. There are no innocent people. Just those who are useful and those who are in the way. He pulled out a knife, the same ceramic blade from the alley. Your mother was in the way. Now you are too. Jamal backed up, his hand finding a pipe on the wall. You talk too much. He yanked the pipe free, and water sprayed everywhere, temporarily blinding the scarred man. Jamal ran, the man's curses echoing behind him. He had to warn the others about the bombs. In the main auditorium, Rivera had positioned herself with the press pool, her camera ready. She could see the commissioner on stage, checking his notes. The room was filling up, city officials, community leaders, cops in dress uniforms. All potential victims. Her encrypted radio crackled. Jamal's voice breathless. Bombs. 3 locations. They're going to bring down the building. Rivera's blood went cold. She scanned the room, looking for anything suspicious. There, a janitor's cart positioned oddly near a support column, and another by the emergency exit. The third would be, she looked up, the lighting rig above the stage. She keyed her radio. Clara, we need bomb squad. Now. Can't trust them. Half might be dirty, Clara responded. We handle this ourselves. We're not trained for this. Jamal, as Susan's voice cut in. Kid lived on the streets, learned from some interesting people. Jamal, can you walk us through disarming them? Maybe, but we need to find them all first. The commissioner had started speaking, his voice echoing through the hall. He was talking about corruption, about cleaning up the city. The irony wasn't lost on Clara as she watched from the back of the room. Morrison was near the stage, ostensibly providing security, but really coordinating his teams. She could see him touching his earpiece, frowning. Their communications were starting to break up as she gradually increased the jammer's range. Then she saw it. The masked man from the warehouse, dressed now as a security guard, moving toward the commissioner. This was it. The assassination attempt they'd been expecting. But something was wrong. The masked man wasn't reaching for a weapon. He was reaching for a detonator. They're not going to shoot him, Clara said into her radio. They're going to blow the building with everyone inside. Blame it on us. The bombs aren't just for killing, Rivera realized. They're to destroy evidence. If the building comes down, any proof of who is really behind it gets buried. On stage, the commissioner continued his speech, unaware that death surrounded him on all sides. Jamal had made it to the janitor's cart by the support column. Inside, hidden among cleaning supplies, was a professional explosive device. Military grade, with a timer showing 12 minutes. I found one, he reported. Timer's already running. Can you stop it? Clara asked. Jamal examined the device, remembering everything he'd learned from Marcus, the former Army Yodi specialist who lived in the tent city by the river. Marcus had taught him about survival, including how to recognize and handle dangerous devices. Yeah, but it'll take time. And if I do it wrong, do what you can. Everyone else, find the other bombs. The timer showed 10 minutes as Jamal carefully worked on the first bomb. His hands were steady, but sweat dripped down his face. Around him, the auditorium continued its normal rhythm. The commissioner speaking, the audience listening, no one aware of the danger. Clara had moved closer to the stage, watching the masked man who still held the detonator. She recognized him now, even with the mask. It was Detective Carl Preston, someone she'd worked with years ago. Someone she trusted. Morrison noticed her approach and stepped to intercept. Hayes, you're supposed to be in custody. Change of plans, Captain. His hand went to his weapon. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. You mean don't stop you from murdering hundreds of people? Morrison's expression didn't change. I don't know what you're talking about. but you're clearly unstable. Officers, restrain her. Two cops moved forward, but Ray Thompson stepped between them. I'll handle this, Captain. Thompson, stand down. No, sir. Not until I understand what's happening here. More cops were paying attention now, sensing the tension. The commissioner had stopped speaking, noticing the disturbance. Is there a problem? He called from the stage. Morrison forced a smile. No, sir. Just a minor security issue. But Preston had seen enough. He pulled off his mask, revealing his face to Clara. Time's up, he said, his thumb on the detonator. Preston, don't. Clara shouted. Everyone turned to look. Preston stood there, detonator raised, his expression calm. You should have stayed out of this, Hayes. All of you should have. The commissioner's security detail moved to surround him, but Preston laughed. You think that matters? When I press this button, everyone dies. The corrupt, the clean, the innocent. A clean slate for a new beginning. You're insane, Clara said. Am I? Look around you. The system is broken beyond repair. The only way to fix it is to burn it all down and start over. Rivera had found the second bomb hidden in the emergency exit door frame. 8 minutes on the timer. She photographed it quickly, then began following Jamal's radioed instructions for disarmament. Susan Marks had located the third device in a lighting rig above the stage, but there was no way to reach it without being seen. I need a distraction, she said into radio. Clara understood. She stepped forward, hands raised. Preston, you're right. The system is broken, but this isn't the answer. Then what is? Preston's voice was bitter. I spent 15 years trying to fight corruption from the inside. You know what it got me? Threats, isolation, watching good cops turn bad or turn up dead. Like my brother? Clara asked quietly. Preston's expression flickered. Your brother was a good kid. Tried to expose the drug running in his precinct. They made it look like a gang hit. Clara felt her world tilt. Her brother hadn't been killed by gangs. He'd been murdered by cops. I tried to investigate. Preston continued. Morrison shut me down, threatened my family. So I started planning. If I couldn't save the system, I'd destroy it. Behind him, Susan had managed to reach the lighting rig, hidden by the shadows. She began working on the bomb, while everyone watched the confrontation below. But you're not destroying the system, Jamal's voice rang out. He stood up from behind the pillar, the first bomb disarmed in his hands. You're just killing innocent people. Like they killed my mother. Preston turned to look at him. The Washington kid. Your mother was brave. Stupid, but brave. She was trying to help people. Same as Officer Hayes. Same as the commissioner. You're not fighting corruption. You're just another murderer. Morrison had been edging toward his own weapon, but the crowd of cops around him included both dirty and clean, and he couldn't act without exposing himself. 6 minutes, Rivera reported quietly. She was still working on the second bomb. Preston's thumb tightened on the detonator. Enough talk. Everyone dies, and from the ashes. The lights went out. In the darkness, Clara heard a struggle, a grunt of pain. Then emergency lighting kicked in. Preston was on the ground, Jamal standing over him with the detonator in his hand. Nobody dies tonight, Jamal said. But Morrison had used the darkness to draw his weapon. He fired at Jamal, the bullet catching the teenager in the shoulder, spinning him around. No! Clara launched herself at Morrison, tackling him as he tried to fire again. The auditorium erupted in chaos. Some cops tried to evacuate civilians. Others didn't know who to arrest or protect. The commissioner was being rushed off stage by his security detail. Susan's voice came over the radio. Third bomb disarmed. Second one too, Rivera added. But Preston was laughing, blood running from his nose where Jamal had hit him. You think you've won? The detonator was a decoy. The real trigger is on a timer. For minutes now. Clara's heart sank. They've been played. Everyone out, she shouted. Bomb threat. Evacuate now. The stampede began, people pushing toward exits. But Clara knew they'd never get everyone out in time. Jamal, bleeding from his shoulder, struggled to his feet. There's a kill switch. Has to be. They wouldn't risk getting caught in their own trap. He was right. Clara looked at Morrison, who was being restrained by Ray Thompson. The captain was too calm. She searched his pockets, finding a small device. A second detonator, but this one with 2 buttons, arm and disarm. How do we know which is which? Rivera asked, appearing beside them. We don't, Clara said. Yes, we do. Jamal said weakly. He pointed at Preston. He's scared now. He wasn't before. That means the bombs are really armed. Clara looked at the device. 2 buttons, no labels. The auditorium was still half full, people struggling to get out through too few doors. Everyone back, she shouted. Give me room. She looked at Jamal, this brave kid who'd saved her life, who'd carried his mother's torch when everyone else had given up. Together, she asked. He nodded, putting his hand over hers on the device. On 3, Clara said. 1, 2. They pressed the button. Nothing happened for a heartbeat. Then another. The timer on Rivera's phone showed 30 seconds remaining. Then a beep. The bomb's timers had stopped. The relief was overwhelming. Clara pulled Jamal into a hug, careful of his wounded shoulder. Around them, cops were arresting Morrison, Preston, and others who'd been identified as conspirators. The commissioner, who'd been watching from the stage door, approached them. Officer Hayes, Mr. Washington, I understand I owe you my life. All our lives. Just doing our job, sir, Clara said. No, the commissioner said firmly. You did far more than that. You exposed the cancer in our department, risked everything to stop it. He looked at Jamal. Young man, your mother would be proud. Her evidence, combined with what happened here tonight, will ensure justice is finally served. Jamal swayed on his feet, the adrenaline wearing off. Clara caught him as he started to fall. We need medics here, she called. As EMTs rushed over, Jamal looked up at her. We did it. We stopped them. Yeah, kid. We did. Morrison, being led away in cuffs, stopped near them. You think this is over? You have no idea how deep this goes. How many people are involved? Then we'll keep digging, Clara said. Keep fighting. That's what cops do. Real cops. Morrison laughed bitterly. You naive Hayes. The system will eat you alive. Maybe, but at least I'll go down fighting on the right side. As Morrison was dragged away, Susan Marks appeared with a tablet. Clara, you need to see this. The evidence upload Rivera did earlier, it's gone viral. News outlets everywhere are picking it up. The FBI is launching a federal investigation. On the screen, Clara could see her own face, Jamal's too. They were being called heroes, but she didn't feel like one. She just felt tired. What happens now? Jamal asked as medics worked on his shoulder. Now we rebuild, the commissioner said. Clean out the corruption, restore trust. It won't be easy or quick, but it's necessary. He looked at Jamal. When you're healed, I'd like to talk to you about your future. The department could use someone with your skills and integrity. I'm 17, Jamal pointed out. We have youth programs, scholarships, ways to help you build the life your mother wanted for you. As they loaded Jamal into an ambulance, Clara climbed in beside him. I'm staying with him, she told the EMT. He your son? The EMT asked. Clara looked at Jamal, this remarkable young man who'd lost everything but never stopped fighting for what was right. No, she said. He's my partner. As the ambulance pulled away, she could see the chaos continuing at City Hall. Arrests being made, evidence being collected, the media descending like locusts. Tomorrow would bring investigations, trials, the slow work of justice. But tonight they'd won. A homeless teenager and an idealistic cop had taken on a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of power, and they'd won. Jamal's eyes fluttered open. Clara, yeah, thank you for listening. In that alley, when I said don't talk, thank you for making me listen. He smiled weakly. My mom always said the right voice at the right moment could change everything. She was right. As the ambulance raced through the city streets, Clara held Jamal's hand and thought about the future. There would be challenges ahead, trials to face, a system to rebuild. But for the first time in a long time, she had hope. Because sometimes, all it takes is one person willing to speak truth to power and another person willing to listen. The hospital room was quiet except for the steady beep of monitors. Jamal had been sleeping for most of the day following surgery on his shoulder, but Clara hadn't left his side. She'd been reading through the flood of messages on her phone. Reporters wanting interviews, federal agents requesting meetings, and surprisingly, dozens of cops expressing support. Rivera entered carrying coffee and a tablet. You need to see this. On the screen was a leaked document from Morrison's personal files, posted by an anonymous source. It detailed the entire network, judges, politicians, business owners, and over 200 police officers across 5 precincts. This is bigger than we thought, Clara said, scrolling through names. Some of these people, I've known them for years. The FBI wants to meet with us this afternoon, Rivera said. They're setting up a task force. They want you to lead the local coordination. I can't leave Jamal. I'm not going anywhere. Jamal's voice was weak but clear. He'd woken up, watching them with alert eyes. You should go. Finish this. Clara moved to his bedside. How are you feeling? Like I got shot. He tried to smile. But alive, so that's something. Rivera's phone buzzed. There's more. Preston wants to make a deal. Full confession in exchange for protection. He says there's another layer to this. Something about your brother's death. Clara tensed. What about my brother? He won't talk to anyone but you. An hour later, Clara sat across from Preston in a federal holding facility. He looked smaller without his mask, without his cause. Just a broken man who'd lost his way. Your brother was on his something big. Preston began without preamble. Not just the drug running, but human trafficking. Kids, Clara. They were selling kids. Clara's hands clenched under the table. Ooh, Morrison ran it, but the orders came from higher up. City council, maybe even the mayor's office. Your brother had evidence, photos, recordings. They killed him for it. Where's the evidence now? Morrison probably destroyed it. But Preston hesitated. There might be copies. Your brother was smart. He had things where only someone who knew him would look. Clara's mind raced. Her brother Tommy had been meticulous, careful. If he'd hidden something, why are you telling me this now? Preston laughed bitterly. Because I'm done. Because maybe if the truth comes out about everything, all of it, then his death meant something. And mine will too. You're not dying. Aren't I? You think Morrison's people will let me live to testify? I'm a dead man walking haze. But at least I can choose what my death means. Back at the hospital, Clara found Jamal sitting up, talking to someone she didn't recognize. A tall black woman in her 50s, wearing an expensive suit. Clara, Jamal said, this is Diane Foster. She was my mom's friend. She's a civil rights attorney. Diane stood, extending her hand. Officer Hayes, I've been following your story. What you and Jamal have uncovered, it's going to change everything. You knew Patricia? We grew up together. I tried to help her when she first discovered the clinic irregularities, but she wanted to handle it through proper channels first. Diane's expression hardened. I should have pushed harder, done more. We all have regrets, Clara said. Yes, but now we have opportunity. I'm representing several families whose children went missing over the past 5 years. Children who were listed as runaways, but whose parents insist were taken. Your investigation might have found the answer. Clara shared what Preston had told her about the trafficking. Diane's face went pale. My God, if that's true, some of those children might still be alive. Jamal struggled to sit up straighter. We have to find them. You have to heal, Clara said firmly. No, he's right, Diane said. Every day matters. I have private investigators, resources. Let me help. Clara's phone rang. FBI Special Agent Sarah Coleman, who was leading the federal task force. Ace, we need you at the Old Riverside subway station. Now, what's happening? We got a tip. There's something here you need to see. Clara looked at Jamal. I have to go. Take backup, he said. Don't trust anyone alone. She brought Susan Marks and Ray Thompson, the 2 clean cops she trusted most. The abandoned Riverside station had been closed for a decade, but as they descended into the tunnels, LED work lights illuminated a horrifying scene. The platform had been converted into a holding area. Cells made from chain link and concrete. Small spaces where people had been kept. Most were empty now, but the evidence of recent occupation was everywhere. Mattresses, food wrappers, scratches on the walls. They moved them, Agent Coleman said, probably when the conspiracy started unraveling. But we found this. She led them to a maintenance room that had been converted into an office. Files, computers, and on-the-wall photos. Dozens of them. Children and teenagers, each with a number instead of a name. Clara scanned the faces and froze. One photo, faded and worn, showed a teenage boy she recognized. Tommy, her brother. He wasn't just investigating, she whispered. He was undercover. He infiltrated their operation. Coleman nodded. We found his real reports hidden in the walls. He documented everything. The kidnappings, the sales, the buyers. International trafficking, Hayes. Your brother uncovered an international trafficking ring. Clara's legs felt weak. Tommy hadn't just been killed for investigating corruption. He'd been murdered for trying to save children. Where are the kids now? Susan asked. We're tracking shipping manifests from a port. 3 containers left last night, supposedly carrying electronics. Coast Guard is intercepting them now. Clara's phone buzzed. Jamal, texting despite being told to rest. Diane's investigators found something. Old warehouse in Chinatown. Still occupied. She showed Coleman the message. We need teams there now. Already moving, Coleman said, speaking into a radio. But Clara couldn't wait. She headed for Chinatown, Susan and Ray following. The warehouse was nondescript, surrounded by legitimate businesses. But as they watched from across the street, Clara saw something that made her blood run cold. Morrison was there, out on bail already, his lawyers having worked their magic. He was with 2 men Clara didn't recognize, and they were loading kids into a van. 3 teenagers bound and gagged. We can't wait for backup, Clara said. That's kidnapping in progress, Ray agreed. We have cause. They moved in fast. Morrison saw them coming and went for his gun, but Susan was faster, her weapon trained on him. Don't even think about it, Captain. Morrison smiled coldly. You have no idea what you're interfering with. Saving kids from being trafficked? I think we know exactly what we're doing, Clara said. One of Morrison's companions made a move, but Ray had him covered. Nobody moves. Clara could hear sirens approaching. Backup was coming. But Morrison was still smiling. You think you've won? This is bigger than you can imagine. People in Washington overseas. You've inconvenienced them. Nothing more. Maybe. But we save these kids. And we'll save the others. What others? You're too late. The shipment left hours ago. Clara's phone rang. Coleman's voice was excited. We got them. Coast Guard intercepted all 3 containers. 43 children, all alive. Clara looked at Morrison, whose smile finally faded. You were saying? As they arrested Morrison and his accomplices, one of the teenagers they'd rescued pulled down her gag. There are more, she said urgently. In the tunnels under the city. Dozens more. 3 days later, the mayor announced a grand gala to honor the heroes who'd exposed the corruption. Clara had argued against it. The investigation was ongoing. Children were still missing, but the city needed something positive, the mayor insisted. A celebration of good triumphing over evil. Jamal was released from the hospital that morning, his arm in a sling, but otherwise recovering well. Diane Foster had arranged for him to stay in a proper apartment, but he'd spent most of his time at the makeshift command center the FBI had set up, helping track down the missing children using his knowledge of the city's hidden spaces. You don't have to go to this thing, Clara told him as they prepared for the gala. Yes, I do, Jamal said, adjusting the tie Diane had bought him. The people behind this, the real power, they'll be watching, maybe even attending. He was right. The gala guest list read like a who's who of the city's elite. Politicians, business leaders, police brass. Any of them could be part of the conspiracy's next level. Rivera met them at the entrance to the grand ballroom, looking uncomfortable in her formal dress. I hate these things. Join the club, Clara muttered, pulling at her own uncomfortable outfit. Inside, the ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and expensive decorations. The mayor stood at the center, shaking hands and smiling for cameras. The commissioner was there too, surrounded by the department's top brass, what was left of it after the arrests. Something feels wrong, Jamal said quietly. Clara had the same feeling. Too many fake smiles, too many whispered conversations that stopped when they approached. Agent Coleman appeared at their side. We've got undercover agents throughout the venue. If anyone tries anything. It's not about trying something obvious, Jamal said. Look at them. They're regrouping, forming new alliances. He was right. Clara could see it now. Subtle nods, meaningful glances, people who shouldn't know each other having familiar conversations. The mayor took the stage, beginning a speech about courage and integrity. Clara found herself scanning the room, her instincts on high alert. Then she saw him, the tall man with the scar, dressed as catering staff, moving through the crowd with a tray of champagne. Coleman, she whispered urgently. Scarred man, waiter uniform, heading toward the commissioner. Coleman spoke into her concealed radio. But the man had noticed their attention. He set down his tray and walked calmly toward the service exit. "I'll follow him," Clara said. "Not alone," Jamal insisted. They moved through the crowd, trying not to draw attention. The scarred man had disappeared through a door marked staff only. They followed, finding themselves in the service corridors that ran behind the ballroom. The man was waiting for them. "Officer Hayes, Mr. Washington, I wonder if you'd notice me." "You're under arrest," Clara said, reaching for her weapon. "For what?" "Serving drinks." He smiled. "You still don't understand." Morrison was middle management. Preston was a useful idiot. The real power remains untouched. "Then help us touch it," Jamal said suddenly. "You were military, right? You had honor once." The man's expression flickered. "Honor doesn't pay bills. Doesn't keep your family safe." "They're threatening your family?" "Not anymore. They're beyond threats now." His voice was flat, dead. "My daughter died 3 months ago. Overdose, they said. But I know better. She was leverage that became a liability." Clara lowered her weapon slightly. "Help us. Help us stop them. Stop them." He laughed bitterly. "You can't stop them, but you can hurt them." He pulled out an envelope. Swiss accounts, shell companies, the whole financial network. Morrison was sloppy, kept records. "Why give this to us?" "Because you're naive enough to use it. Because maybe it'll mean something." He started to walk away, then paused. "Check the mayor's office. Tonight, while everyone's distracted here." Before they could respond, he was gone, vanishing into the service tunnels with practiced ease. "We should tell Coleman," Clara said. "After we check the mayor's office," Jamal countered. "If we bring in the FBI, it becomes official. Warrants, procedures, time for evidence to disappear." They made their way through the building, using Jamal's knowledge of service corridors and Clara's police credentials to avoid security. The mayor's office was supposedly locked and empty, but the door was slightly ajar. Inside, they found Councilwoman Linda Price behind the mayor's desk, photographing documents with her phone. "Councilwoman," Clara said, surprised. Price spun around, startled, then relaxed. "Officer Hayes. Thank God it's you. What are you doing here?" "The same thing you are, I imagine. Looking for the truth." She held up a document. "The mayor's been taking bribes for years. Approving permits for businesses that don't exist, funneling city funds to shell companies." "You're investigating him?" "Someone has to. Internal affairs for politicians, you might say." Price's expression was grim. "After what you exposed, I started digging. The corruption goes all the way up, Hayes. The mayor, half the city council, judges." She showed them a photograph on her phone. The mayor meeting with men Clara recognized from the warehouse, from the trafficking ring. "He knew," Jamal said quietly. "About the kids, about all of it. More than knew. He facilitated it, provided official cover, made sure investigations went nowhere." Clara heard footsteps in the hallway. Multiple people moving fast. "We need to go," she said. But it was too late. The door burst open, and the mayor himself entered, flanked by private security. "Councilwoman Price." "Officer Hayes." "Young Mr. Washington." His smile was cold. "Breaking and entering is a serious crime." "Not as serious as human trafficking," Clara shot back. "Trafficking? I don't know what you're talking about. I'm simply a public servant who discovered intruders in his office." "We have evidence," Price said. "Do you?" "All I see is a bitter political rival trying to frame me." He nodded to his security. "Arrest them." "These aren't cops," Clara said, recognizing none of the security team. "No, they're private contractors. Perfectly legal. And since you're trespassing..." Jamal had been quiet, but now he held up his phone. "Smile, Mr. Mayor. You're live on social media." The mayor's face went pale. Jamal had been streaming the entire conversation. "You little." 20,000 viewers and climbing, Jamal continued, including several federal agents and journalists. "Want to keep talking about how you don't know anything about trafficking?" The mayor's security team exchanged uncertain looks. They were mercenaries, not idiots. They knew when a situation had gone sideways. "This proves nothing," the mayor said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Maybe not, but this does." Price held up a hard drive. "Your personal files, Mayor. Every dirty deal, every bribe, every child you helped disappear. I copied it all." The mayor lunged for her, but Clara intercepted him. using a restraint hold Tommy had taught her years ago. "You're under arrest," she said, "for assault, conspiracy, and whatever else we find on that drive." Real police arrived within minutes, summoned by Coleman, who'd been watching Jamal stream. The mayor was led away in handcuffs, his political career destroyed in real time as the video went viral. Back at the gala, which had descended into chaos as news spread, the commissioner took the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you've witnessed tonight is exactly why we needed people like Officer Hayes and Mr. Washington. The corruption was deeper than we imagined, reaching the highest levels of city government. But it's been exposed, and it will be prosecuted." He looked directly at Clara and Jamal. These two represent the best of what our city can be. Courage in the face of power, integrity in the face of corruption. Later, as the gala wound down and arrests continued across the city, Clara found Jamal on the ballroom's balcony, looking out at the city lights. "You okay?" she asked. "Thinking about my mom. She started all this, you know." Her investigation into the clinic led to the discovery of the trafficking, which led to Morrison, which led to the mayor. She never got to see it finished. She would be proud. Yeah. He was quiet for a moment. That man, the scarred one. He lost his daughter. Morrison lost his freedom. Preston lost his soul. Everyone in this thing lost something. You lost your mother. But I gained something too. He looked at her. A partner. A friend. Maybe even a future. Clara put her hand on his good shoulder. The commissioner wasn't kidding about that youth program. You can make a real difference. Like you did. Like we did. Together. As they stood there, phones across the ballroom began buzzing. Coleman's voice carried from inside. "We found them. The missing children, all of them. They were being held in an abandoned hospital on the east side." Clara and Jamal ran back inside. On Coleman's tablet, they could see live footage of FBI agents leading dozens of children out of the building, alive and safe. 47 children, Coleman said, tears in her eyes. "Your brother's notes let us write to them, Clara. Even in death, he saved them." Clara felt her own eyes burning. Tommy's sacrifice hadn't been in vain. "There's more," Coleman continued. "With the mayor's files and Morrison's testimony. He flipped an hour ago. We have enough to dismantle the entire network. National and international." The commissioner approached them. "Hayes, Washington, I know you've been through hell, but I need to ask. Will you help us rebuild? Create a new task force, one dedicated to preventing this from ever happening again." Clara looked at Jamal, who nodded despite his exhaustion. "Yes," she said, "but we do it right this time. Full transparency, citizen oversight, and Jamal gets a full scholarship to college while he's in the youth program." The commissioner smiled. "Deal." As the night ended and the city began to heal, Clara thought about how it had all started, with a teenage boy grabbing her in an alley, covering her mouth, and whispering, "Don't talk." Sometimes the most important moments came from the most unexpected places, and sometimes the smallest voices carried the most important messages. The courthouse steps were packed with media as Clara and Jamal arrived for Morrison's trial. 3 weeks had passed since the gala, and the city was still reeling from the revelations. The mayor was in federal custody, 14 city council members had resigned, and over 300 arrests had been made across 5 states. "Officer Hayes, Jamal, can you comment on Morrison's plea deal?" reporters shouted. Clara kept walking, her hand protective on Jamal's good shoulder. His arm was out of the sling now, but she knew it still hurt him sometimes. They'd been through dozens of these appearances, grand jury testimonies, federal depositions, media interviews. Each one necessary, each one exhausting. Inside the courthouse, they found their usual seats in the gallery. Agent Coleman was already there, along with Rivera and the team of federal prosecutors. Across the aisle sat Morrison's expensive legal team, and behind them, families of the rescued children. "All rise," the bailiff announced. As the judge entered, Clara noticed movement in the back of the courtroom. The scar man was there, sitting alone in the last row. He'd been granted immunity in exchange for his testimony, but he looked like a ghost of himself. Morrison was brought in, orange jumpsuit replacing his captain's uniform. He looked older, grayer, but his eyes still held that cold arrogance. The prosecutor stood. "Your Honor, we call our first witness, Jamal Washington." Jamal walked to the stand with quiet dignity. He'd testified before, but this was Morrison directly, the man who'd orchestrated his mother's death. Mr. Washington, the prosecutor began, can you tell the court about your mother's investigation? Jamal's voice was steady. She discovered that medical supplies were being diverted from her clinic. When she traced the shipments, she found they were being used to sedate trafficking victims. She tried to report it, but every agency she went to, someone would shut down the investigation. And that someone was Captain Morrison. He was one of them. He controlled which detectives got which cases, buried reports, threatened witnesses. Morrison's lawyer stood. Objection. Speculation. I have the reports, Jamal said before the judge could rule. My mother's notes, documenting every blocked investigation, every threat. And we have Morrison's own files confirming it. The evidence was displayed on screens. Patricia Washington's meticulous documentation alongside Morrison's records seized from his home. The correlation was undeniable. She knew they would kill her, Jamal continued, his voice thick with emotion. She told me if anything happened, to find someone who would listen, someone who couldn't be bought. And did you? Jamal looked at Clara. Eventually, yes. The cross-examination was brutal. Morrison's lawyer attacking Jamal's credibility, his homelessness, his age. But Jamal remained calm, answering each question with the same quiet strength his mother had shown. During a recess, Clara found the scarred man in the hallway. Victor Kozlov, he said, introducing himself properly for the first time. Former Spetsnaz, before you ask. Why are you here? To see it end, and to give you this. He handed her a flash drive. Morrison had partners overseas. Arms dealers, human traffickers, terrorists. That contains everything I gathered during my time with them. Why trust me with this? Because you saved those children. My daughter, she would have been their age. His voice cracked slightly. Make it count. When court resumed, Clara was called to testify. She recounted that night in the alley, Jamal's warning, the discovery of the conspiracy. But when Morrison's lawyer stood for cross-examination, he had a different strategy. Officer Hayes, isn't it true that you've been romantically involved with Mr. Washington? The courtroom erupted. Clara felt her face burn with anger. He's 17 years old. I'm his mentor, nothing more. But you've spent considerable time together. Moved him into an apartment. Paid for his expenses. Through official channels and charitable organizations. Everything documented and appropriate. Still, some might say your judgment has been compromised by emotional attachment. Clara stood straighter. My judgment led to saving 47 children from slavery. My judgment exposed corruption that reached the mayor's office. If that's compromised judgment, then I'll take it over the alternative. But Morrison's lawyer wasn't done. He produced photos, Clara and Jamal, at various locations over the past weeks. Nothing inappropriate, but taken out of context, they could be misconstrued. Your Honor, the prosecutor objected. This is character assassination. The judge agreed, but the damage was done. Some media outlets were already spinning the story, trying to discredit their testimony by implying something inappropriate. That evening, Clara found Jamal on the roof of his new apartment building, looking out at the city. I should move out, he said without preamble. Stay with Diane Foster, maybe. The case is too important to let them twist it. No, Clara's voice was firm. That's what they want. To isolate us, make us doubt ourselves. But if it hurts the case, the evidence hurts the case. Our testimony hurts the case. That's why they're attacking us personally. She stood beside him. Your mother faced the same thing. They called her paranoid, unstable, said she was having affairs with suspects. Anything to discredit her. How do you know that? Victor gave me more files. Your mother wasn't their first target, just their most thorough. Jamal was quiet for a moment. Emise here. I know. Your brother would be proud of you, Jamal said suddenly. Tommy, right? He tried to do what we're doing. Save those kids. Clara felt tears threaten. He was just 22. Younger than me when he went undercover. I thought he was being reckless, told him to be careful, to follow procedure. He was careful. He documented everything. Yeah, but he was also alone. No backup. No one who knew what he was really doing except Morrison. Clara's voice hardened. Morrison sent him to die. The next day brought a shocking development. Morrison's lawyer announced his client wanted to make a statement. Against advice of counsel, Morrison took the stand. I want to address Officer Hayes directly, he said. Clara met his gaze steadily. Your brother was a good cop. Too good. He found things he shouldn't have, pushed where he shouldn't have pushed. I gave him chances to walk away. You mean you threatened him? I offered him opportunities. Join us. Get rich. Live well. He refused. Morrison's expression was almost respectful. He said he had a sister to make proud. Said he'd rather die honest than live corrupt. Clara's hands clenched in her lap. So you gave him what he wanted? Morrison continued. An honest death. Fighting criminals, trying to save kids. Heroic, really. The gang shooting story was a kindness to you. A kindness? Clara stood, rage flooding through her. You murdered him. I gave the order. But you want to know who pulled the trigger? Morrison smiled coldly. Preston, your masked friend. He volunteered, said it would help him maintain his cover as a crusader against corruption. The revelation hit like a physical blow. Preston, who'd claimed to be fighting the system, had been part of it all along until his very recent break. He played you all, Morrison continued. The bombs at City Hall? My idea, but Preston refined it. Make himself the villain to expose the conspiracy, knowing he'd get a deal for cooperation. Brilliant, really. The courtroom was in chaos. Preston, who was being held in protective custody, would now face murder charges. The carefully constructed prosecution case was suddenly more complex. But Coleman had been prepared. She presented new evidence from Victor's files, recordings of Morrison giving orders, including the one to kill Tommy Hayes. The defense tried to claim they were inadmissible, but the judge allowed them. As the day wore on, more truth emerged. Morrison had been recruited by international crime syndicates 20 years ago. He'd risen through police ranks specifically to provide cover for their operations. The child trafficking was just one piece. Drugs, weapons, even stolen military technology had flowed through his network. You ask why. Morrison said near the end of his testimony. Look at this city. Look at any city. Crime is eternal. You can't stop it. You can only choose whether to profit from it or be crushed by it. There's a third choice, Jamal said from the gallery, his voice carrying. Fight it. Morrison laughed. Fight it? Boy, your mother fought. Where's she now? Her work is here, Jamal stood. Her evidence convicted you. Her courage inspired others. She's more alive in this courtroom than you'll ever be. The judge called for order, but Morrison had one more card to play. Check the basement of St. Catherine's Hospital, he said. The closed wing. You'll find your answers there, Hayes. St. Catherine's Hospital had been closed for 5 years, another casualty of budget cuts. Clara, Jamal, Coleman, and a full FBI tactical team entered through the main entrance, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. What are we looking for? Coleman asked. Morrison likes games, Clara said. This is either a trap or the final piece of evidence. They descended to the basement, finding the closed wing Morrison had mentioned. Behind a locked door marked Records, they found something none of them expected. The room was set up as a command center. Maps on the walls, computers still humming with power, and in the center, a woman sitting at a desk. Patricia Washington, Clara breathed. Jamal froze. The woman turned, and it was her older, thinner, scarred, but unmistakably Patricia Washington. Mom, Jamal's voice broke. Hello, baby, she said, tears streaming down her face. The reunion was interrupted by Coleman's team securing the room, checking for threats, but there were none. Just a woman who'd been presumed dead for 3 years. As Jamal embraced his mother, sobbing, Patricia explained, Morrison didn't kill me. He kept me here, forced me to work on his books, manage his international contacts. Said if I tried to escape or contact anyone, he'd kill Jamal. But the body they found, a homeless woman who died of natural causes. Morrison's people altered the records. Patricia held Jamal tighter. I watched you on the news, baby. Watched you grow up through security cameras Morrison showed me. Watched you become the man I always knew you could be. Clara felt rage and joy warring in her chest. Morrison had put them through hell. Let Jamal believe his mother was dead. All for what? Control? There's more, Patricia said, composing herself. I've been documenting everything. 3 years of Morrison's operations, recorded, filed, backed up. Every contact, every transaction, every murder. She led them to a wall of filing cabinets, each meticulously organized. "This is enough to prosecute hundreds of people," Coleman said, scanning the files. "Maybe thousands internationally." "That was the plan," Patricia said. Morrison was paranoid. He wanted records of everything in case his partners betrayed him. He just didn't expect me to make copies. She handed Clara a specific file. "This is about Tommy." Clara opened it with trembling hands. Inside were photos of her brother during his undercover work, reports he'd filed, and at the bottom, a letter in his handwriting. "If you're reading this, Clara, then Morrison kept his word to deliver it after my death. I know what I'm doing is dangerous, but these kids need someone to fight for them. You taught me that with your integrity, your courage. I love you, sis. Make them pay." Clara broke down, clutching the letter. Jamal, still holding his mother, reached out to touch Clara's shoulder. "We did it," he said softly. "We made them pay." The next hours were a blur. Patricia was taken to a secure medical facility for examination and debriefing. The evidence from the command center was cataloged and distributed to federal agencies worldwide. Morrison's network began collapsing as arrests were made in 12 countries. And Morrison's sentencing 2 days later, the courthouse was even more packed. Patricia Washington, in a wheelchair but determined to attend, sat between Jamal and Clara. The rescued children and their families filled several rows. Morrison was brought in, his arrogance finally gone. He'd been abandoned by his lawyers, his allies, everyone. He stood alone as the judge read the charges. 247 counts including murder, trafficking, conspiracy, and corruption. "Before I pass sentence," the judge said, "I want to address something. This case was broken by two people who refused to give up, Officer Clara Hayes and Jamal Washington. They faced threats, violence, and character assassination, but they persevered. They represent the best of what we can be." She turned to Morrison. "You, on the other hand, represent the worst. You betrayed your badge, your city, and humanity itself. I sentence you to life in prison without the possibility of parole, sentences to run consecutively for each count." Morrison was led away in silence. As he passed their row, he looked at Patricia. "You won," he said simply. "No, Patricia de Plaith. Justice won." Preston received 40 years for Tommy's murder and his role in the conspiracy. The mayor got 30 years. In total, over 400 people were convicted. 6 months later, Clara stood in the rain at Tommy's grave. His headstone had been updated to reflect the truth. "Died a hero, saving children." Jamal stood beside her, accepted into college with a full scholarship, but still working with the youth program. "He would have liked you," Clara said. "I think I would have liked him too." Patricia approached, walking with a cane, but getting stronger every day. She'd returned to nursing, working with trafficking survivors. "The commissioner called," she said. "The new anti-corruption task force is ready. They want you both to run it." Clara looked at Jamal. He was 18 now, technically an adult, but she still saw the scared kid who'd grabbed her in that alley. "What do you think?" she asked him. "I think Mom's right. Someone has to keep fighting. Someone has to keep listening." As they walked from the cemetery, Clara thought about that night in the alley. Jamal had whispered, "Don't talk. Just listen." It had saved her life. But more than that, it had taught her the most important lesson of her career. Sometimes the most powerful voices came from the most unexpected places. A homeless teenager who everyone ignored. A nurse who everyone dismissed. A young cop who everyone underestimated. Morrison had been wrong about one thing. Crime wasn't eternal. As long as there were people willing to fight, willing to listen, willing to stand up for those who couldn't stand for themselves, there was hope. The rain was stopping, sun breaking through the clouds. The city sprawled before them, still wounded but healing. There would be other conspiracies, other corruption, other fights. But now they were ready. "So," Jamal said as they reached Clara's car, "ready to save the city again?" Clara smiled, thinking of Tommy, of Patricia's courage, of all the children they'd saved. "With you? Always." They drove into the city, partners in every sense that mattered. The teenager who'd learned to survive on the streets, and the cop who'd learned to listen. Together, they'd exposed corruption that reached the highest levels of power. Together, they'd saved dozens of children. Together, they'd honored the memories of those who'd fallen. And together, they'd continue the fight. Because someone had to listen. Someone had to care. Someone had to stand between the innocent and those who would exploit them. In a city full of noise, sometimes the most important thing was knowing when to be quiet and listen. Jamal had taught her that in an alley, with 3 simple words that changed everything. Don't talk. Sometimes that was all it took to hear the truth. What would you have done in that alley? Stayed silent to protect yourself? Or risked everything to save a stranger who might not even believe you? If this story of courage against corruption moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful stories that remind us that heroes come from the most unexpected places.